Hello everybody and welcome to Flock Talk. Today I'm going to be showing you how to successfully integrate two new birds into the same household. Now do keep in mind that parrots are not supposed to be housed in the same cage unattended. This is not a tutorial for that. This is a tutorial on how to take a bird who already exists in your house and introducing a new one into your household so that way they can get along, maybe even preen each other in the cooperative social spaces within your household. So the very first step with this actually starts before you even bring your new bird home. One of the first things I did with Newt when I realized that Toto, a Quaker parrot, was the kind of bird that I was going to be bringing home was I started desensitizing Newt to those sounds. And what that would look like is I would basically just play a lot of different videos that were of Quaker parrots making a variety of different sounds and reward Newt for hearing those noises. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to help Newt familiarize himself with those sounds and how to feel about them. If I'm constantly pairing them with treats and I'm constantly pairing them with positive experiences, then he's not going to be nearly as scared or confused or threatened when he does start hearing those sounds in his house for real. By the time Toto ended up coming home, Newt was completely neutral to all of these videos and showed absolutely no problems towards them at all. When you bring your new bird home, you want to set them up in a space where they cannot see each other. In my case, I have the bird room downstairs and I have Toto's room upstairs. So the birds are completely separate and there's no way for them to see each other and they can have their individual social times without having to see the other bird. And the reason for this is that it's a very big step to go from only one bird in a home to all of a sudden there's another creature in here. So if they can see each other and they can access each other, a lot of aggression can occur, a lot of that defensive territorial behavior can occur, and they can suddenly launch at the cage and do a lot of harm. So what I want to do instead is make sure that they cannot access each other, but they can only hear each other. And even with the practice of those videos from earlier, we will still see that when Newt hears Toto for the first time, he begins to fluff up and present a little bit of an aggressive dance. Now, Newt is not being blatantly aggressive, he's not being super territorial, he is confused and he is scared. So Newt is fluffing himself up and putting on a bit of a show here to try and express that he's a big scary bird, please leave him alone, why are you in my space, I don't understand what's going on. And that's what we're seeing in Newt's body language here. So what I'm going to do is anytime that Toto makes a sound, I'm going to give Newt a treat. And I will do the exact same process from Toto's side of things as well. Anytime they hear one another, they're getting a treat so they can start to realize that that bird making a sound is going to be followed by a positive experience. It's not being followed by fear or by threats, it's just being followed by a treat, it's being followed by something good, and they can start to calm down and relax and feel a lot less threatened by the sound that's going on. As we practice this more and more, we can start to see that whenever Toto makes a sound, Newt is completely calm. And this is what I want. I don't necessarily even want my birds to be super excited for each other. That's not my goal. My act of pairing the sound with a treat isn't with the intent of making them really excited when they hear each other's sound. That can create a bird that is very overstimulated and overexcited, and then the same problem can occur when you finally have them out together. They're too excited to see each other, and aggression can happen. When it comes to a parrot's brain, aggression and excitement are very close together, and if they get overexcited, it can flip over into that aggressive part of the brain by accident, and a lot of injuries can occur. So what I'm aiming for here is calmness. I want my birds able to look at one another, hear one another, and be calm and relaxed. That is the state of mind that I'm trying to reinforce. That's what I'm trying to create. What I can find happens a lot of the time is if you're using really high value treats, you'll start triggering that really excited state. Anytime the bird hears the sound, the same way that a clicker works, they'll get excited for it. So if you find that you're using treats and your bird's getting too excited, what you can try instead is something even lower value, maybe even scritches, something that's going to initiate calmness in them already. Using scritches is an excellent way to do that because it automatically triggers that nervous system response to help them calm down. It starts initiating preening behaviors. It's already a naturally existing response to fluff up their head and preen, and all of that helps the bird calm down. So if your bird will accept scritches, it's an excellent way to scritch them after each sound so that way you can encourage more of that calmness and relaxation and general comfort with the sounds instead of blatant excitement. Once I'm at a state where both birds are able to hear one another and remain totally calm and confident, be able to exhibit their own behaviors, even completely ignore the sounds that the other bird has made, that's when I know that we're kind of ready to move on to the next step. This next stage we need to be very careful for. So what I'm going to do is have both birds in their carriers, ensuring that they're both very comfortable and content being in their carriers for a duration of time first. And we're going to just have them see each other for the first time. So I would pick an area of the house that is a neutral territory zone. So I'm not going to do this in the bird room that is already an established space that could effectively feel like it belongs to one of the birds with resources and things that they could want to protect. I'm going to pick a communal area of the home that maybe the bird doesn't spend a lot of time in, or is just an area that they've shared with other birds before. This way the birds are going to be less likely to want to get defensive about their space or feel threatened about another bird coming in. So for me, this is the kitchen/dining area of my house. It's not somewhere my birds sit a lot, and it's somewhere that Newt has pre-coexisted with birds in the past. He is quite comfortable sharing the space, no problem. So the best way to set this up is to have the birds as far away as I possibly can. Because they're in small carriers, we're not giving them a lot of choice. So we want to be very careful about how we proceed here, because if I'm the one in control of where they move, and I'm the one in control of how close they are to the thing that they could be finding scary or threatening, we can have a lot of problems show up, right? The bird has no autonomy over what happens to them. That can put them at a state where, you know, fight or flight. Flight is not an option for them right now, and you could come out with even more aggression if this isn't managed appropriately. So the reason why the birds are both in carriers is because both of these birds are fully flighted. So if I were to bring them just both up, they could easily launch at each other and a huge fight would break out, and that would be a terrible way to start a new relationship. It will take a very long time to teach them to trust each other after that. When they're filled with so much fear and anxiety and then a fight actually happens, that just confirms all of that fear and anxiety that they were feeling before, and it can make it even worse and even more persistent. So having them in carriers like this helps reduce that problem, so now they are no longer at risk of causing more anxiety and causing more fear for themselves and causing a fight and getting hurt, and it puts them in a situation where now they are in control, they are restrained in a manner that I am able to have an 100% guarantee that a fight is not going to happen. So with that, we're going to have the birds as far apart as possible to start, and we're just going to move based on their body language. So at this super far distance, all I'm going to do is give the bird a treat every single time that they look at the other bird. I want them to be able to acknowledge them and let it go. So things I would like for this situation might be looking at the other bird, it might be choosing to go and play with a toy or do something else, it might be offering calm or happy vocalizations, walking away and foraging, it could be settling down and preening, it could be yawning, anything that is a behavior that is calm, not aggressive, and overall acknowledging the other bird and being able to move on. Those are the main things that I'm wanting to reinforce. I want them to have positive experiences with. I want them to be encouraged to exhibit more of those behaviors. Another key thing I'm making sure I'm doing is have my wife and I switch places. Newt is a very touchy bird. He's had aggression problems in the past because of the way that he was raised with his previous home. So Newt does have some one-person attachment and can sometimes teeter on overstimulated aggression. So what I want to make sure happens is that Newt sees me interact with Toto. And this can happen for a lot of birds that are very possessive of one person. When another bird enters their space, they may become a little bit aggressive because now they feel like you're being taken away or someone else is threatening what's theirs. And so what I want to make sure I do is have Newt see me feed Toto treats and then come back and give Newt a treat. And what this is going to do, depending on if it's done correctly, is it's going to show Newt that Toto can interact with me and Newt will still get something. So Toto will get a treat, and that's okay because Newt's still going to get a treat in a second. And he's going to start to learn that Toto getting things from me or Toto interacting with me benefits Newt as well. And that's going to help reduce that aggression or totally negate it before it ever shows up. Once I'm starting to see the birds calm down to a pretty good amount where I'm not needing a constant stream of treats to keep them calm and not fixated, I'm going to move the carriers a little bit closer. And I'm wanting to move it in very, very small increments so that way we can see how they feel. Because they could have been comfortable where they were, you could move them an inch, and all of a sudden now it's too much. So it's important that we are taking care of our birds and paying attention to the way that they're feeling when we're progressing through this. If I were to just put the carriers 3 feet ahead really fast, they could end up feeling really, really threatened and really, really scared, and that's going to ingrain in their memory. I want them to acknowledge each other and not feel scared. I want to avoid as much of that fear as possible, so it's not even in their brain. It's not even a thought for them to have. They should only be able to see each other and feel calm and feel relaxed. The only worry I want them to have for this whole experience is when the next treat is going to come. So we continue with this process over and over and over again, and these birds moved really quickly. We were able to get them side by side within the first 20-minute session. How long you have sessions for, again, is completely dependent on your birds, how comfortable they are on the carriers, how comfortable they are on the situation. You may end up doing shorter sessions with your birds, you may end up being able to go longer, just depends on the birds at play. Newt started getting a little antsy in his carrier at about 20 minutes, so we ended the session there. Once we hit the stage where the birds were able to comfortably exist pretty dang close to each other, where the carriers are almost kissing, this is where I switched things up a bit and rotated the way that the cages were facing. So initially I had the cages facing one another because on Newt's carrier, that orange backpack, it's pretty difficult for him to see through the sides, whereas the front is a really big open space. And I wanted it to be really easy for him to be able to see Toto on the other side of the room without too much having to deke around or potentially blocking his vision and not knowing whether or not he was actually acknowledging Toto. And that served its purpose. But now that we're working in such a close proximity, I want to try and give the birds as much control over the situation as possible. So once we're at this proximity where the cages are really close together, it's really easy for a bird to feel quite stuck or out of control. So the carriers have been rotated so the birds have more choice over how close they are to the bird in the other cage. So they can both easily choose to shuffle closer or shuffle further away. This gives them some of that control back, helps them feel a little bit more calm and comfortable, and also just makes it easier for me to be able to read them. With so much going on, it's really easy to miss body language cues. So by having the perches like this, if your bird is pinned against the far wall, it's a pretty obvious sign that they're maybe not ready to be at that distance yet, and to give them a little bit more space away. It just makes your life so much easier to be able to read their body language and will make your bird feel way more comfortable to have that control over the situation again. So same thing throughout this process, we're offering treats. Ideally, we'd offer treats both towards each other and far away from each other, so they're not obligated to be close in order to get the treat. But Newt's carrier doesn't really allow for that too well, so he's only able to access treats from Toto's side. But thankfully it works pretty well. And what you can begin to see happen is without even any treat lures, Newt is wanting to spend a lot more time closer to Toto's side. He's a lot more interested in what's going on over there. We're not seeing as much blatant fear, with him feeling like he needs to be squished against the furthest side of the cage. Both birds are pretty comfortable. We see Toto shuffling across, more worried about the next delicious snack that's coming. Neither bird is particularly worried about the other. They're both making sounds and vocalizations, and it's not triggering the other bird. What I will also do throughout this is Newt has a bunch of vocalizations on cue, so I will ask him to make those sounds, and that's a good indicator for two things. For one, it tells me Newt's comfort level, because if Newt is stressed, he will not make a vocalization. So him being comfortable talking and making those sounds on cue tells me that he's feeling pretty good. And then on Toto's half, it lets me see how he's going to react to Newt making sudden loud sounds, and lets me see his comfort level as well with that. Toto didn't really care, or he would make a happy peep back, which is an excellent sign for me that these birds are both very happy and content with one another. So in order to know whether or not I am ready to progress, I want to make sure of a couple of things. One, I want to make sure both birds are comfortable and confident with each other. This includes their vocalizations, this includes the bird moving and shuffling about, this includes direct visuals of each other. I want to understand that under every possible circumstance, this bird is comfortable with every possible thing that I can make happen in a carrier. They are comfortable with it, that they're not going to be scared or startled because of the other bird, that they're overall pretty content. The second thing I want to ensure is 100% on point is that both my birds are able to respond to cues. And this is extremely important because the next stage is letting one of them out. So if I go ahead and don't check that, and then I open a bird up and let them out, and they go launching at the other one and don't respond to any of my cues, that's a fight, that's bitten toes, that's a bad situation. I need to make sure that my bird can respond to cues with the other bird present. So what I'm going to be doing is, Newt is very well trained, so I'll ask him to wave, I'll ask him to spin, ask him to speak. I can get a ton of little behaviors from him inside the carrier in close proximity to Toto and see how he responds. I see that Newt is very quick, very responsive, very eager to work for the treats, not really worried about Toto, not super fixated on Toto. That's perfect. Now Toto, the new bird, as yours very well may be as well, is not trained at this point. He doesn't know anything other than Step Up and the introductions to Recall. So for Toto, the thing I want to make sure of is that he can follow a lure. So I'm going to hold treats at different distances, make sure he can follow them. My main thing for him is just making sure that he is still food motivated with the other bird present, and that he's able to fixate on the treat and not so much on the other bird. So when it comes to letting Toto out, I'll be able to keep him kind of distracted. I'll be able to keep his focus on me. Instead of being worried about him responding necessarily to a direct cue, I'll be relying on Newt for that. So if a fight were to happen, I know that I can recall Newt out of the situation and someone can intervene and grab Toto because he's a new bird. And a new bird is not going to know recall as well as a bird that has been recall trained for 5 years. Recall and Step Up are the two behaviors that I make sure a bird knows prior to meeting anybody else. So at this point, Toto has been introduced to recall. He is capable of recalling. It may not be as good or as finessed as, say, Newt's will be, but it's at least a good base starting point. So if something does happen, he understands the skill and I have a pretty good chance of getting him to me if that is needed. It is something I do highly recommend doing because when it comes to having both birds out, it does help you a lot if you are able to have some level of control over them from a distance, especially if you are working with two flighted birds where a lot can go wrong really quickly and they can fly very far away from you if you don't have a good recall setup. So I do recommend introducing the new bird to the concept before this. You have 30 days of quarantine anyways. Recall usually only takes a couple weeks as long as you're not working with a super fearful bird. But it's going to be something that has to be played by ear and making the decision that works best for you and the bird in your care. Okay, we are moving on to what is potentially the most stressful step in my mind, and this is when you give your bird that little bit of trust and you open the carrier door for the first time. So I'm going to let out the bird that I have the most trust with, and that is Newt. Newt has been trained for a very long time. He has a strong food drive. I know that he's going to be able to stay with me, and his default response to being scared or threatened is to fly away. So I know with a decent level of certainty that he's not going to launch straight at Toto's cage and cause a lot of problems. So what I'm going to have happen here is I'm going to have my wife stand square in front of Toto's cage. Newt's a smart bird. Birds are smart in general. They know the other bird is still there, even if my wife is completely blocking them. But my purpose in this is that I do not want a direct route straight to Toto's cage. If Newt happens to be really excited that there's a new friend or feeling really threatened, he can launch straight at the cage. It is a possibility. So I just asked my wife to stand there to ensure that there isn't a direct route. So if Newt does feel threatened, he isn't able to land directly on top of Toto's cage. Additionally, we have put a towel over the top of Toto's cage. This is to protect Newt's toes. If he does happen to land on there and Toto doesn't like it, someone could end up getting their toes bit. I don't want that to happen, so the towel's there to keep them safe. So throughout this process, we're doing a lot of the same sorts of things. So I'm going to work with Newt. I'm going to reward him just for looking at Toto and remaining calm, give him treats for not launching at the cage, give him treats for being calm when Toto makes a sound. I might ask for some behaviors from him to ensure he's still responsive and calm. And we can see that Newt is pretty scared. He's pretty thinned out. He's not sure how to feel, but he is still very responsive. He's listening well, and he's overall doing really great for the first time having a bird out. Newt and Toto, which I learn after all of this, are both extremely social, happy birds. They're very eager to meet one another. So this process flies past. The first time that you let a bird out, you might be stuck just standing on the other side of the room for a couple weeks. That's totally fine. It depends on what your bird's pace is. In my case, they were both fine. Like, Newt was a little bit scared, a little bit uneasy, but they were both very interested in each other and both decently confident, all things considered. So I was able to get Newt from the other side of the kitchen to right beside Toto's cage and still be calm, happily taking treats, no aggression, all that sorts of stuff. But do be aware that this is not usually how long this process takes. And I mean, for reference, introducing Newt to Mia, I mean, it was a good year at least before Mia let Newt cuddle him, and it was another couple years before Mia let Newt scritch her. So it can be very dramatic in how long this process takes, depending on the birds that you're working with. An additional thing I'm making sure to do here is I am reinforcing Toto, or I'm getting my wife to reinforce Toto for being comfortable whenever Newt does fly. Having a bird fly past you or over your carrier can be very threatening and very scary, especially when it's a bird you don't know yet. So anytime Newt makes a flapping sound or Newt makes a vocalization, Toto's getting some extra treats to ensure that he still feels safe and comfortable and confident with the whole experience. We're not just forgetting about him because he's in a cage and can't cause any harm. We will repeat this exact same process for the other bird. I do have slightly different expectations for Toto because he is a new bird. He doesn't understand nearly as many things. My main goal for Toto is not to be able to respond to every cue under the sun that he's only just learned this month. It is just for him to be able to relax, and quite honestly, Toto was the better out of the two of them. For the majority of this, Newt was quite scared, quite thinned out, a little uneasy. Still very willing to work and still very interested in everything that was going on. But when you compare that to Toto's body language here, you can see that Toto is still very lightly fluffed up. He's making a lot of vocalizations. He's very interested in Newt and kept wanting to crawl over to the carrier. He was very, very eager and very relaxed. This is like the perfect level of body language you would want both birds to be at before letting them both out together. So Toto's body language here is the ideal end goal. Why Toto is this chill right out the gate is beyond me. I honestly got nothing on why exactly Toto is this chill. He really shouldn't be with everything we know about him, but for whatever reason he is, and it made my life very, very easy. So we're gonna roll with it. One thing I do want to note and draw attention to here is that Toto is spending a lot of time near Newt's carrier, and although that's great for Toto's sake, it's great to see that level of curiosity, it's great to see that interest. We have to remember that Newt is trapped, right? He is in a small carrier. He cannot get further away if he wants to. So what we need to ensure we're doing is, as much as Toto is the more threat at the moment, since he's loose and can cause problems, and Newt's carrier is fully contained, we do need to watch out for Newt's state of mind. If he's getting a little uncomfortable with Toto being there, we need to advocate for his space. We need to be the ones to move Toto away. And give Newt the boundaries that he's trying to set from within his small carrier. If I were to ignore all of Newt's body language cues and allow Toto to continuously pester him through that carrier, that's going to teach Newt that his body language doesn't work, and the only way to get Toto to go away is to get extremely aggressive, and that's going to set us up for a lot of problems down the road. So it's really important to pay attention to both of their body language, even when they're in a carrier. That way we're going to be able to set them up for proper, healthy communication when we're working on them integrating together. Once both birds have been able to show how calm they can be around each other and super responsive, we can begin to let them both out. Again, how long this takes depends entirely on the birds you're working with and your level of experience. This was like day 3 for us, which is absurd. This should basically never get done within 3 days. That is a crazy amount of time to get them at this level with. Both of them were just really, really good birds, and we're very happy about that. But what we're going to do is we're going to let them both out. And what's going to happen is, again, we're working in a very neutral zone. This is a social space that Newt has ample experience living in with other birds. This is not a main territory zone. There are no accessible resources. There is nothing that exists in this space that the birds could want to potentially fight over, or that could potentially amplify any insecurities or problems that the birds may be experiencing. So with both birds out, I have both my wife and I on our feet, treat pouches are ready, and we are basically being the fun police. How you have this set up is going to depend on who you're working with. For us, we just communicate throughout the whole process on which bird we've got and how things are going. Ideally, Newt would have just stayed with me and it would have been fine, and then Jack would have had Toto the whole time. But as we can see, Toto gets extremely excited by Newt entering the space, and he takes off. And so what I do to block him, I don't want to scare him. Right? If I start flailing everything and I start really terrifying Toto, then he's going to start associating going to see Newt with being scared. And I don't want that. So all I do is very carefully lift my hand up into the air, and that's just working as a blockade to help guide them into a new direction. I'm not trying to hit him out of the air. I'm not trying to grab him. I'm just trying to guide him somewhere that isn't on my person. And then Newt gets a little scared of Toto flying and lands straight on my wife, which works out perfectly. She's able to take him to safety, and then we're basically just continuing to be the fun police, body blocking Toto from going towards Newt and just working on the best that we can to keep them kind of separated. So at this point, nobody's really sure how to feel about each other, right? Both birds have very conflicted feelings. Newt's feeling a little bit scared, but you know, he is a potential friend, not really sure how to feel about it. Toto, on the other hand, is just extremely excited. He's been very excited about Newt from the beginning. He's very, very wanting to get near him. He wants to be close to him. Toto thinks that they're best friends already and would really love to cuddle him. Newt is not ready for that. So it's really important at this stage that we intercept their interactions and make sure that both birds are listening to each other. Because when you have a bird like Mr. Toto, who is so excited to go and say hi and go and see a new friend, they can accidentally completely ignore the other bird's body language, and that can get them off on the wrong foot. If you keep ignoring Newt saying no, Newt's going to eventually bite you in the face for not listening the first 600 times he tried to tell you to go away. So it's very important that we are trying to keep them separate for the first little bit and teach both birds how to regulate the way that they're feeling. And so in Toto's case, we're teaching him how to be calm and relax and not need to be near Newt. And in Newt's case, we're working on building his confidence and teaching him how to walk away from situations instead of causing conflicts. And we're just trying to encourage healthier communication. And this is where things get challenging, as if things hadn't already been very stressful and chaotic within these first couple weeks of the birds meeting each other. It is extremely important that you facilitate healthy interactions. And what that means is that you are an active part of their interactions every single time. Birds, especially ones that have been raised in captivity, will have a lot of problems not knowing how to read another bird's body language. You have a bird that was raised and separated from its parent at a pretty young age. They will not have developed good communication with other birds. It will be a struggle. It's not something they're going to be super familiar with. It's going to be kind of like learning a new language. It's going to take them a bit of time. In this case, I also have 2 different species of birds, so it's going to take them a bit to learn each other's nuances and what each little tiny behavior cue actually means. And then we also have the case of, even if both birds really, really want to interact with each other and they're doing really great, there can be a lot of conflict and issues that cause a bird to not feel like they're able to leave a situation, and that can cause a lot of tension and a lot of fights. So we want to make sure that we are actively engaged every single time that the birds are anywhere near each other, so that way we can help them out, so that way they learn to develop healthy communication. And healthy communication basically just means being able to read the other bird's body language and respond to them appropriately. So if Newt sets a boundary and says, "I'd like you to stop," we need to teach Toto how to back off and give some space. And if Toto sets a boundary and gets a little bit too intense and pecks him a little too many times, we need to show Toto how to de-escalate and listen to Newt's signals that are saying, "I'm trying not to be a threat." And that's going to take a lot of time. It's a lot of staring at their body language and intercepting them when need be. It's a lot of very, very careful management until these birds both build more confidence with each other and start to more fluidly understand each other. During these first interactions, you'll also see me scritch both birds quite often, and this does 2 main things. 1, it reinforces them for their calm behavior, but 2, it also triggers the calm behavior to exist in the first place. So allopreening, or one bird scritching another bird, or a human scritching another bird, is a naturally calming behavior. So by me choosing to scritch the birds, it's going to trigger that little part of the brain that tells them to fluff up and calm down and present other preening behaviors. And all of this is going to function to help the birds relax, and that's what I'm trying to shape. I want my birds to be able to be calm and be relaxed. So scritching not only helps reinforce that calmness and give them ample positive reinforcement for being calm in the first place, but it also helps kickstart that process and encourage both birds to begin being calm. So after the first, 3 days or so of having the birds out, where our main goal is just to keep the birds basically completely separate, what we're trying to do during those first 3 days is just teach them how to ignore each other. It doesn't matter how excited they are, it doesn't matter how much they want to be near one another, they need to learn how to be able to relax, how to be able to calm down, how to be able to see another bird in their space and go off and do their own thing. And the reason for that is A, for all the overstimulation things that I have listed earlier, but also to ensure that the bird is capable of doing things without the other. when you introduce new birds and you have a bird like Toto that's super clingy, it can cause a couple of problems. One being that he could end up continuously pestering Newt. You know, he wants to be near Newt so much, he wants to interact with Newt so much, and Newt gets fed up and needs space. And Toto could then struggle and not know how to handle himself by himself and continuously push those boundaries until a fight breaks out. And the second reason is that we want the birds to be able to slow down and actually acknowledge what they're feeling. What can happen, and what does end up happening between these two, is they can end up being so excited to interact with each other, they've been missing their mates for so long, they really want to see a new bird. They cannot end up acknowledging how scared they really are, how uncomfortable they really are, or even how they don't like certain things about the bird beside them. So even if they're super eager to see this new bird, they can end up squishing in beside them, they can even end up preening, and then suddenly realize that they're scared and they're stuck really close together and they don't know how to leave because they're so scared, and it'll suddenly hit them. And then that's when major fights can break out. So helping them slow down and just be able to relax near each other helps them regulate that part of their brain a little bit, helps them process the way that they're feeling and actually realize, hey, I'm a little uncomfortable with this bird. As much as I want to be close to them, I'm a little uncomfortable. And then we can work on that and we can help them feel safer, we can help them feel more confident, and then they're able to integrate with each other and be a lot healthier and have a much longer lasting relationship. So during these first 3 days, we see a lot of great improvement. We go from Toto constantly trying to fly around and get to Newt, to both birds being able to preen and relax on different people, to good calming behaviors, to both birds learning how to kind of move away, mostly Newt learning how to safely move away from Toto chasing after him, Newt learning that there's safe boundaries, that he can go to the other person and he won't be harassed. Just lots of really good stuff with both birds just being able to preen and be calmly coexisting. At that point, when I'm seeing a lot of consistent calmness, is when I will start to allow short interactions. And these interactions are going to be kept very, very short for one very specific reason, and that is to prevent conflict. So as I stated earlier, it can be very common for a bird to rush in together, get super comfortable, and then realize how scared they are. And then instead of enjoying that experience and going, oh, I preened my friend, it was so much fun, what ends up happening is they go, oh, I approached that bird and I left feeling scared and uncomfortable and we had a fight. And that can stick in their brain and they'll go, I went near that bird and a fight happened. And that will stick. So instead, what I want is to have these birds calmly approach each other, have their little happy moment, communicate their boundaries, have a good time, and then move away. This way they go, oh, I approached that bird, they listened to me, and that was that. We had a good time. And so they're starting to have positive thoughts about the bird. They approached the bird and they listened really well last time. I approached that bird and they preened my head and I had a good time. Even though it might feel mean if they're preening each other to kind of help separate them because, oh, they're so cute, they're having such a good time, allowing that to stay for really long periods of time can cause them to build that conflict and that tension, and then it'll suddenly explode. So for these first interactions, I want to make sure they end successful. I want to make sure they stay positive. And there's a few different things that I'm doing to ensure that the interactions are positive. So first off here, Newt is a bird that is a little bit more uncomfortable, whereas Toto is really excited and really wants to say hi. So I have my hand placed between both birds to allow Newt to have a strict boundary. He can still interact with Toto if he wants to. He also has full freedom to walk away if he wants to, but my hand is there in between them. One, to give Newt a little bit extra safety, to help him feel a little bit more comfortable, like Toto's not going to be able to touch him. And for two, it allows me to quickly fling one of the birds away or grab one of the birds. I have a hand between them. If they were to lock beaks and get into a fight, I have a grip. I am right there. I can stop it. So doing this, we can see the birds begin to interact, decide how they feel, and observe each other in a safe manner. And I'm basically just going to allow them to communicate and set a little bit of a boundary. So every time that I see Newt get uncomfortable and walk away, I'm going to reward him for that. I'm happy that he chose to leave the situation instead of starting a fight. And if Newt tries to set a boundary or present a little bit of not aggressive behavior, but just wanting to set a limit and say, I didn't like that, and Toto responds well by walking away or breaking eye contact or preening, something to diffuse the tension, Toto will get a treat or verbal praise or something to reinforce him for that. We are trying to encourage healthy interactions as much as possible. So anytime we see one bird listen to the other, anytime we see one bird have a lot of patience and use a lot of body language to communicate instead of clacking beaks together and pecking or getting a little excessive with super big fluffy displays, those are the things I want to reinforce. And if I see things go a little bit too far, which is typically on Newt's half, if I see Newt present a little bit too much aggression and not opt to walk away from a situation, that's where I'm going to help intercept a little bit more, and I'll encourage both birds to walk away from one another. So that way they're learning that fighting is not necessary to get what they want, fighting is not necessary to communicate, that they have the option of walking away to diffuse that tension, and everything will be okay. As these sessions go on and on and on, you'll see me give them a little bit more freedom, where my hand might not necessarily be between them, or I might use one hand instead of two, and I'm just doing my best to allow them to gradually get closer to each other, so long as they are communicating well. The second that I see them starting to struggle, I'm going to use some vocal cues or my hands to help separate the birds and encourage healthier communication. But we're trying to just gradually ease them in to being able to fully interact with one another. This is also giving them both a really good opportunity to observe each other's body language from a safe distance and decide how they feel about it or what it even means. Newt gets pretty funky with his dances in order to set boundaries and tell other birds to give them space. And at the beginning, Toto seems a little confused by this. And I mean, fair. I would also be pretty confused by this. So it's going to take them both some time to acknowledge each other's body language and decide what it really means. And with the help of me guiding them away and reinforcing them for making the right choice under those circumstances, they're going to start to learn, hey, when Newt does this funky little dance, it means move away. And that's going to help them learn how to communicate in a more effective manner. If I were to just give them a free-for-all at this point and just say, hey, you guys can communicate and figure it out, a lot of fights are going to happen, and aside from the fact that someone could get seriously hurt, we're also looking at the long-term damage that could have on their relationship. If I let them basically just fight it out and establish a quote-unquote pecking order, then we would have some problems where the birds now have a lot of negative experiences with one another. They've learned that whenever they interact, a fight breaks out, and they have really bad feelings about the other bird being there. And now there's a lot of tension and a lot of conflict just by the presence of another bird. Whereas in this situation, with me monitoring their interactions and ensuring that they're going to interact in a healthy and safe way and respect each other's boundaries, they're going to have a lot more positive interaction, they're going to have a lot more trust in each other, and be able to have a long-lasting relationship. And we can see just how well this process works by the fact that it's been 1 week at this point and the birds are preening each other. They might every now and then get a little bit stuck and need some help moving apart, but one single week, that's it. And both of these birds have learned to trust each other well enough to allow allopreening, to be comfortable having their backs turned to one another, to be fluffed up, and even sleeping in the same room as one another. Those are huge milestones for birds to accomplish in a span as short as a week. So it just kind of goes to show that taking things slow and ensuring that you're helping them learn to communicate goes a very, very long way in helping them establish a good solid relationship and give them reasons to trust one another. And if you're more curious about how to read specific body language, or maybe you're not totally seeing the signs, I have been doing a short series over on Instagram where I take little clips of these two interacting and I break down exactly what their body language is saying and what I've done to intercept or why I didn't intercept to help them integrate more effectively. So I'd go check those out if you need the help. Otherwise, that is kind of it. I'm going to leave this video here. I can make another video on how I'm going to go ahead to integrate both these birds into territory spaces if you guys really want me to. At the present moment, I know that's going to take months of work, so I'm not going to rush into posting it anytime soon, that is for sure. But if it's something you'd like to see more about, let me know and I can absolutely do that. I'm just not sure whether or not I should make it because you shouldn't be integrating two parrots into one cage. With my setup, it's a bird room with two separate cages. And that's why it's kind of weird with, like, they do need to be integrated into the same territory, but not the same enclosure, right? So I have a bit of a weird setup, which is why I need those extra steps to integrate them into a shared space. So, I mean, if it's something you want to see, I can make a video on it. I'm just not sure whether or not it's something that you guys would really get much benefit out of, since it's not very many people have a bird room that you need to integrate a bird into, and like I said, you shouldn't integrate two parrots into the same small cage. So I'll leave that there for now. That is how you would successfully integrate two birds into one shared space and be able to integrate each other, to interact and have good social times without a lot of conflicts and scary fights. A quick thing I forgot to mention is that this entire process can be really stressful on all the birds involved, so it's really important to take note of their body language and ensure that you are keeping the sessions as short as necessary to keep both birds not stressed throughout this process. What is also important is noting the fact that the existing bird is used to having your attention all the time, and suddenly seeing you divide your time between them and another bird can cause them to feel quite distressed, quite scared, and potentially even feel like the other bird is a threat because they're taking you away from them. So it's really critical to make sure that you are setting time aside to spend individual time with both of these birds, so that way they're not only reliant on each other or potentially becoming quite threatened by one another because they're both taking your attention away from each other. Usually it's pretty easy to negate that problem. All you have to do is spend a little bit of extra time with the bird that was in the household prior, just some one-on-one time with them to ensure that they're still feeling like they're very important to you, and that way the other bird is not being perceived as a threat. And that is it. This is a very lengthy process. It takes a lot of time to do it right, but it does pay off in the end. It only took about a week, week and a half for both of these two who had never met each other before to get along so well that they were preening each other and wanting to be cuddled and squished together and having no issues with one-person aggression or getting protective over anyone because they were introduced in such a calm and positive manner. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and provided something helpful for you to learn today. That is going to be it from me today, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye! You good bird? Yeah?